Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the GYST Method Show. I am Nicole Gerard, joined as always by
Kirby James here on a gorgeous summer Friday.
Yeah.
Hence the no shaving thing today. Because, you can get tons of stuff done and, not have to be primed and primed to look your best.
Listen, remember what I said before in another video. A lot of leaders hesitate and they're scared to make videos because they think you have to be perfect. But no one cares what you look like. They care about the content.
Well, I think they care a little bit about what you look like, but
not as much as people think.
Because, makeup, studio, God, no. Just, put it out there.
There we go.
Let's go. Right. If you've got great stuff in your head, we want to hear it.
Exactly. So good segue. We've got some good stuff in our head. So you and I were talking about actually a former on summer holiday coming up again, working with them again in the fall client that had some really tough decisions to make.
Yeah.
And it got us talking about resilience and that stress inoculation we talk about, which brought us to the idea of having the guts to make cuts. Right? I love that.
Rhyme.
I love a good rhyme.
Right,
but what does that mean? Okay, so what we're talking about is oftentimes when you are a leader, even as an individual, but specifically as leaders in an organization, you've got to make tough decisions. And they can be positive decisions. They could be perceived as negative. It could be a change. But you need to have that's why I say guts to make cuts. On the side where if you have a decision to make where you need to cut some things loose, you've got to be able to do it.
My observation, and, we both work with a lot of senior people and, having been in those roles myself, it's tough.
Yeah.
Talking about, people's welfare, their income, to be completely cold about it is to be inhuman.
Of course. Yeah.
Yet there's a practicality to it. It's a little bit like being in a wrong relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, there comes a point where it's time to say, no, I'm done. And, business is like that. And you're right. It is tough.
Yeah. And I think it's more whenever you hear, you have to be tough and you have to be resilient to be able to make these tough decisions. I've had to let people go. It sucks. It sucks for everybody. Yeah. But there's also another piece to this in terms of letting bad situations go. And the example that came to my mind while we were talking was in regards to technology and platforms and processes. Yeah. There are so many businesses, and I just had a client earlier this year that they were struggling really badly with this, where you've invested time, money, resources, energy, hope, praying that this new platform,
for example, release would fix it.
Right? That this next thing, this new tool is going to do wonders for the organization. And at some point you look at it and go, ooh.
I'm done.
And there's a decision point here, but there's two paths that I see individuals make. The one path is, okay, we've tested this long enough. This is not going to work. Cut it. Stop. We need another solution. Then there's the other option, door number 2, which unfortunately more organizations make, which is, well, let's just keep trying. Bandaid solution. Let's tape this together. Let's continue. And maybe things will change. Maybe something good will happen. Let's try and make it work. And they just throw more good time, money, people, and resources chasing after the wrong solution.
One of the things in my observation about these scenarios is a disconnect with what's real in terms of cost. So let's take your IT example. We've invested X dollars, X staff, X time, X resources, X reputational capital. And what ends up happening is they look at the costs without seeing all the other costs, like what it's doing to their people to have to do 19 gymnastic steps to do everything. Like the cultural impact that you say you're all about being excellent. And it's just like, really, you can't make this decision? Everybody around you. And there's just so much more to these scenarios than reputational capital or money. There's a larger issue at play.
Yeah. And Like, I think we all understand the fear around making a poor decision, or what you perceive to be is going to be a hit to your reputation, or that you're not capable in the position you're in. But I think you agree with me that you actually are stronger, more capable when you recognize when it's time to pull the cord.
Well, and I can envision, meetings where that's actually the topic.
Mm.
And the senior leader, and we've been talking about the way senior leaders process things and the research and the people we follow, like Roger Martin, who talk about this, have done tons of work.
Yeah.
It's their ability to go to a meeting with a hypothesis. It's their ability to go out there and really truly welcome that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
Because making, those having the guts to make those cuts, part of where those guts or that resilience comes from is in, really strong manager, strong leader ability to put out uncomfortable ideas and allow diverse opinion to actually come forward. Right. And
Yeah.
because, when you get to that point where it looks like maybe we have to cut X or Y, there's no reason, quite in my opinion, that these leaders need to do this in this solitary, siloed, ivory tower kind of manner, because that's actually, to me, that's way riskier.
Yeah. And I always look at things now through the lens of what's the GYST moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as you're starting to look at what's happening and what's going on day to day and the decisions that are being made, if you are continually having a conversation about a particular leader, if you are constantly hearing feedback about bottlenecks, if you are trying to develop and put placeholders, and I always call them Bandaid solutions between systems and trying to develop all these hooks and API access and trying to paste things together, there's got to be a moment where, and it's the GYST moment, where you say, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And this is true whether you're trying to improve something or whether you're trying to introduce something totally new, and what kind of capabilities do you have? There reaches a point where you need to take a look at what's going on in front of you and say, okay, we've been doing this long enough. And that's the other thing. The flip side of this is doing it too quickly. So not testing enough, not getting enough data. There's that fine line between you give up too quick and it's shiny object syndrome, and you're putting everyone through the ringer because nobody will put an end to the situation. Right?
There's something you just said up, and that for me is what allows leaders to actually have these GYST moments, is when they set numbers of some kind, whether it's accountabilities and deliverables of individuals, whether it's cost, functionality, or other data around software systems.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be some reference point as an augment to how you feel and how you think about it, because your graph behind me, if you don't have data and you're not visualizing that data, it's very easy to keep extending, giving that other chance. It just goes and it goes and it goes. But if there's a threshold that you've set and you are so far past that threshold, and you're rationalizing why it's okay, that to me, the GYST moment came and went.
Yes. Which is interesting, because I think sometimes leaders do have that hindsight and they go, ooh, okay, about 3 months ago when I had that gut feeling, I did see the data, I do see the value in pulling the cord, and I just didn't do it. Now it's 3 months later. Can I still do it? Can I still say, okay, that's enough, without any ramifications to my position, my reputation, etc.?
I'll give you, there's a client that we've worked with, and they're really in the software business, dominant in their market space, using, quite frankly, a very, very old product that they kept putting Band-Aids on. It was a desktop install, and they had hordes of support people and salespeople and all of this stuff, and they continued to be very successful. And they were still making lots of money, but it was killing them, and they knew, and their customers knew. That the day had come and gone for a GYST moment. And when they finally got around to saying, okay, sure, we will, the life cycle, the development life cycle for the replacement product based in the cloud was so long that by the time they made the just moment decision, they really had made it about a year and a half too late.
I like that you said that, because it brings up a point that you and I talked about earlier, where there's testing.
Yeah.
And especially from a lot of the personal consulting that I've done with clients about software and LMS systems and training, a lot of times there's this desire to flip one off and turn one on. And there's no, because
that happens all the time.
It's too much work to run them next to each other. And what happens is, if the one that you've chosen after your testing period proves not to be the right one and you need to get rid of it, there's nothing, like you're starting over again and again and again unnecessarily.
Again. Well, yeah. And I actually have a personal experience with this in a completely different realm.
Okay.
I was the chair of a board, and we were operating with one governing model. And we recognized that it wasn't serving us or the organization well. Mm-hmm. We actually continued to operate that model of governing a board of directors. And at the same time, in parallel, we developed the new one. And we had to live in this schizophrenic brain where we knew what we were creating, but we had to come and follow the existing rules until the time came when we believed that the new way of running our board of directors was going to work.
Yeah.
And we did flip the switch, but we could only flip the switch because we had developed them in parallel and we knew the second one was going to work. And very much like a software system, there was a motion. Motion number one was stop using that model. Motion number two was start using the next model, because we'd gone through a development and testing phase in parallel.
Yeah.
Had we hit a hiccup that said this one won't work, at least to your point, we had something to use.
Yes. And then everything isn't interrupted unnecessarily. Yeah. And I mean, yes, obviously you're looking for a new solution because the existing one is antiquated or it's out of date or what have you, but at least it's keeping the business together while you're looking for something else to do, right?
And this is what our client did. Even though they maybe got on that cloud project a little bit late, they had such an excellent development process and testing process. And they even ran pilots to take key clients who were very keen for the new edition.
Perfect.
And they rolled it out. They worked out the bugs, and the clients knew, and they had the desktop backup. So, I mean, it was brilliant. And they're now, on a fantastic path to sunset that old application and move on with the next generation. And it's going fabulous.
Yeah. And see, it's curious to me how leaders can come up against this decision. And those that do have resilience are, like we've talked about in so many other episodes, they're going to look at the amount of effort that's in front of them and go, okay, we got to get everybody on board. Everyone agrees we're going to go in this direction. We're all prepared emotionally, physically for the upcoming push and do it. And a really resilient leader is going to, rally the troops, and we're going to get this done. And then there's a start and a finish. Please, dear Lord, there's a start and a finish. I cannot stand when projects just have this open-ended date and nothing ever ends and everyone is just constantly stressed doing 80-hour weeks. No. But then there's the leader, unfortunately, that looks at what's in front of them. And if they're not very resilient or confident in what the next steps are going to be, they go, okay, we'll look at that after. Band-Aid solution for now. We'll do it later.
Or even picking up on something I said earlier, there's relentless meetings about, so what should we do? And there's never a just moment to say,
yes,
let's go.
It's too much talking. It's too much analyzing. It's too much, just a little bit more data. It's too much up here and not enough doing.
There was another thing you said when you gave that sort of door number one, door number two example earlier. And I've seen this particularly when it comes to personnel decisions, staffing decisions.
Yep.
Where there's the realization that something's not right or not working or doesn't look like it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And these really resilient leaders, they have that just moment. It's just like, okay, we're done. Yet they have the discipline and the emotional intelligence to not lash out or act unwisely in the interests of the business.
Yeah.
And then they take the steps to do it well and do it right, rather than do it right now, just
Yeah.
because they can't stand the stress and the pressure.
I mean, genuinely, I can only think of one example where I actually had to let somebody go because it was so crucial to put a stop to the relationship that it had to be done with like no notice, no planning, no nothing. Like it was a serious situation. Every other instance, and it's funny because you see a lot of these inspirational business quotes, especially in the HR community. It's hire slowly, fire quickly. But I think the more accurate statement should be hire slowly, address quickly, handle it quickly.
And that's a key point. And
Yeah.
an example from another client that I assisted through this process, they had a key leader on the operational side, and they sought out this person, and they thought this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And when they started to realize that while the person is wonderful, they turned out not to be a great cultural fit for this new business.
Yeah.
They realized they didn't have the performance metrics and the things that would be necessary to move to a termination without significant legal and financial complications.
Right.
So the leaders sat down and they had a conversation. It's like, okay, in order to do this in a way that doesn't endanger our entrepreneurial startup, they then started creating performance metrics. They started measuring to them on a regular basis. And while it took a couple more months that were uncomfortable, by the end of it, they were in a position to be able to say, yeah, this is what we asked for. This is what we got. And along with a bunch of other anecdotal observations.
Which is cool. But then we also have examples of individuals we've worked with. And we used an example earlier where something had changed with that individual. And then after having like some honest and open conversations about it, the situation turned around.
That's true too.
Right? So when I say I don't think it should be hire slowly, fire quickly, it's hire slowly. So you make sure you do the best you can to get the right people in. But then once you see that there maybe is some sort of misalignment, address it quickly. Don't let it go on for months. Don't wait for these antiquated quarterly and annual reviews. Deal with it right away because you never know. They might be miserable too and feel guilty about leaving early.
Yeah,
right?
that's a great point, because to me, GYST moments, as you've highlighted them, are those moments where you realize that something, to your point, needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But it's not approaching it in a unilateral and sort of myopic way, turning it into a conversation.
Yeah.
And when really strong, resilient leaders nurture great cultures, those challenging conversations, while not easy, can be functional and productive.
Yes, and helps with stress inoculation.
Right. And to your wonderful example, it could be the discovery of something that you had no idea about.
Yeah.
Like their mother is terminally ill or who knows what.
Yes.
And it's like, well, no wonder you're so distracted and not around, and
Right?
but for whatever reason it hasn't come on the table because life happens.
Yes, and it's funny because I can think of at least 3 different examples in 3 different organizations right now where I'm speaking with the leaders and they had been expressing to me that something has changed with a key player. And after I encourage them just to have a conversation, not probing, not being inappropriate, but I'm here if you need anything. It's come out that in 2 of them, they were one was having a major life change and the other 2 was because of a family illness.
Well, and I want to pick up on that just a little bit more, because anything I can do to help is, to me, insufficient.
Yeah, true.
And the reason is because it's not put in a context.
Yes.
Whereas it's like, hey, Nicole, ever since you come on board, it's been great. You're doing wonderful. I got to tell you, though, in the last X weeks, days, months, I've noticed something has shifted And, is there something we need to know about? Is there something we can help you with? Because if it's just sort of that, hey, how's it going? Can I help?
You're absolutely right. And that is actually what they did.
Right. And it's not the purview of work to be entitled to know about your personal life.
Of course.
It is the purview of work to know about your performance.
Yeah. And if a human organization is going to recognize we're all humans working together, and while not crossing that professional boundary, if you will, it's okay to reach out and say, I've noticed a change. I need to say something. Is everything okay?
Right.
And then it's up to the individual to share, but at least they know, and there's the opening for that conversation.
And there can be, so many circumstances where it's just like, it's none of your business.
Absolutely.
Yet, the discrepancy between the performance expectations of the organization and the actual performance of the person is the business of the organization.
Of course. Yes, absolutely.
And so that to me is again, one of those just moments where you need to be able to recognize this is happening, then have the chutzpah to actually say, okay, got to have that conversation.
Yeah,
I don't love having conversations, but they need to be had. Yeah. And then when you get to it, then you afford the person on the other side of the conversation to have their just moment. And maybe their response is, it's just none of your business.
Mm-hmm.
And
at which point you can turn to performance.
Right. You turn to performance.
Yeah.
And I have seen this go, all the different directions it can go, including one occasion with a really, really big client I had worked with where, quite frankly, the EVP came forward when challenged this way and said, I'm at a point in my life where what's going on in my personal life, which is none of your business, is more important than work. I'm actually going to resign and step away. And they did. Because they were doing a bad job on both ends of the spectrum, and made a very courageous choice, which I always well for them.
And that takes guts.
It takes a lot of guts. Which is what we're really talking about. The heart of resilience, and you and I, talk about this all the time. The core of GYST comes from resilience and courage.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in this context, I'm glad we had the conversation about leaders and having the guts to make cuts, whether it's interpersonal in terms of HR and with your team, whether it's recognizing going down the wrong path that you thought would be great for the business, whether it's systems, processes. I think it's important to bring that to light, and that it's okay that if you retroactively realize that 2 months ago you should have done it, like they say, the best time to plant a tree.
Yeah, it's now.
20 years ago, the next best time is now.
And this fits into another conversation we've got coming up, which is talking about cultures of innovation, which so many businesses say they want.
Yes.
Yet the very thing we're talking about here, that in those cases, it's the guts to make cuts, but it's also the guts to take chances.
Yes, love that.